Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
Dormant for now, but very dangerous. That's what they say. Iranian military sources starting to attack civilian targets, the finance world, the tech world. Yeah, price of gas and fuel around the world goes ballistic, especially in America. The U.S. military spending a big money on war, the transgender Bill of Rights, and more. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman with an eye on the news the networks refuse to use, that's for sure. And I've got Lance Migliaccio with me, one of the Big Mig brothers, thebigmig.com. They're available on Liberty News Radio on the weekend. They're also everywhere. Rumble, X, YouTube, and the list goes on and on. Their big phrase, and I agree with this 1,000%, listen up. If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they don't want to hear. Lance, welcome, sir.
Hey, thanks, Sam. Happy to be here. As always, rise and grind, tip of the spear. That's how we do it.
There's so much going on, man, in the news. It's just hard to even handle. But I want to talk about this headline, dormant but dangerous. Are sleeper cell operatives quietly living inside the United States? U.S. is on top of Iran sleeper cells, Trump claims. But security experts are warning, hey, man, sleeper cells and inside operatives could be, kind of dormant right now and just kicking back, but they're waiting for orders. Activation orders, if you will. The Strait of Hormuz being blocked and Trump saying, hey, you don't dare do that or we're going to annihilate you into oblivion. But then the sleeper cells, because of Joe Biden, are probably all over the country. It might even not just be Iranian sleeper cells. It might be Chinese and more. Concern raises difficult questions about border security, intelligence capabilities, and how prepared the U.S. is to detect threats inside our own country. Lance, what do you say about this? You used to be a contractor and stuff, so you might have a good handle on this to bring to the table, sir.
Yeah, I think right now the American people have to have situational awareness. There's no doubt that during the Biden administration, the intentional opening of our borders so they could create this 30 million plus deep ghost voter pool, it absolutely was what they were doing. Because let's face it, common sense would tell you that open borders don't make a lot of sense, that we would be the only country in the world that does that and just freely allows people to come in without any true vetting. And as far as the sleeper cells, I would have to tell you that I believe, in fact, it is true. The U.S. intercepted some encrypted communications, and they believe those originated in Iran, and they serve as maybe operational triggers for these sleeper assets, that they were triggered from outside the country. It wasn't just here that received them. Other intelligence organizations in other countries say that they received them. So I think it's likely, and why wouldn't they do it? With open borders, that made Biden made it very easy for different countries. We know there's 8 different divisions of Chinese CCP military in the country. A lot of them say that they're housed in safe houses throughout on a bunch of this land that we allowed the Chinese to buy, the farmland. So look, this would be a smart move on their part. We gave them way too much time. Iran knew that the U.S. was going to make a move. They could have brought them in even short term. So look, I think that this is something that should be of great concern for all Americans right now.
Do you think President Trump is on top of it? He says, don't worry, we're on top of this thing.
No. I absolutely don't think that this administration has all the intel, because if they did, they would have already gone and grabbed him. I don't think the FBI domestically, so far, I'm not thrilled with what's happened with the administration. I don't feel like they're doing the job that I thought they were going to do. I thought after I read the book Government Gangsters that we had a plan to go after the deep state. And as far as these operatives, it's really complicated because we don't have any tracking. They intentionally allowed these people to move all around the country. They set these dates far out for supposed, hearings about their status. We don't think they used real names. We saw lots of identification. Ben Berkwam, Oscar L. Blue, and others came on my show many times talking about the horrendous things that we're finding. And for example, Ben has a bag of IDs, Sam, that's probably, 130 or 140 different countries where individuals threw their IDs away. They threw away cell phones. They threw away currency from specific countries they had. this was scattered all over the Darien Gap and all over preliminary border locations. Of course, we know a lot of NGOs assisted them in coming over. You have to look at it for what the truth is. And I don't believe they have any idea where all these people are. Because if they did, look, Tom Homan's job would be a hell of a lot easier, wouldn't it?
Well, and Tom Holman even highlighted that we don't know where they are, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, he even said that. So let's, we're not taking words out of anybody's mouths or anything like that. Tom Holman said, hey, we just don't know where these people are because the Biden administration was so derelict in their duty that we have no idea. And we've got a tough row to hoe. Now, I pray that Trump and Tom Holman and many others are getting on top of this. I don't know. There's so much lawfare about it. There's so much whining from the Democrats and everything else to where I don't really even know how much they've been able to take action on that. Every time we find out there's a lot of action happening on something, then there's a massive setback with these out of control judges that, in my opinion, should be impeached, et cetera. They're not, interpreting the law or whatever. They're basically trying to, activate from the bench or become activist judges from the bench. And so, President Trump and company, I'm not downing them in this statement, but I am saying, man, they've had a row to hoe against our own people and our own, I don't know what you want to say, divided country, almost even more so than dealing with possible terrorists and cells and everything else.
Yeah, look, this is a difficult job. Tom Homan's been doing a great job, but you're right. We got a weaponized judiciary. We've got a lot of bias that's presented because, of course, these are obstructionist practices that are intentional to undermine the administration. If without full control of Congress, they can't do what they'd like to do. They'd like to go for impeachment against Donald Trump. So they have to create all these other problems across the country. They're doing a disservice to the American public. Listen, Chuck Schumer came straight out and was talking about the SAVE Act and said, oh, this would remove lots of immigrants from the voter rolls. He came right out. He said the quiet part out loud. At the end of the day, that's what they wanted. Well, that's why they didn't want to know where they're at. That's why they wanted to move them all around the country, because then all of a sudden, Javier Rodriguez, who we have no idea who he is, we have no idea what part of the location he is. Of course, I'm sure he would send in a absentee ballot, and of course, they would vote in the way that these individuals in Congress want them to. And I think the guilt goes on both sides of the aisle. You just can't talk about it. That's one thing that I want to tell the audience. Just listen, forget politics, forget Democrat and Republican. That's not what we have. We have a uniparty. And the truth of the matter is you got one group effectively doing all sorts of actions to create this ability to cheat and lie and steal elections. And I think the Republicans, some of them are participating in it also. And you got the Republicans doing nothing. I mean, John Thune, unbelievable. We can't even get an act passed for voter ID. You need an ID to get on a plane. You need an ID to buy a gun. You need an ID to pick up prescriptions. Why wouldn't you need an ID for voting? One of the most important rights we have as an American, as Americans. It's unbelievable. Listen, I'm so disgusted. We've been covering this on the show, Sam. I don't know how you feel about it, but I keep some airplane vomit bags next to my desk because I'm constantly puking over the stupidity of what we're being fed.
The problem is that, when society becomes immoral, and when parties take over, the founding fathers warned against parties. And when you have a fake fiat, Federal Reserve money system, I believe parties and the fake money system are two of the greatest problems we have. But we got to have an ID to do everything concerns me as well. Not because I don't think that, Americans should be the only ones voting, but it used to be dealt with on the precinct level where, you would know if somebody wasn't your neighbor. Because it was a small, 1,000 people or less. And you pretty much, have seen people around, who belongs, who doesn't. But then we take that and we put it to, mail-in balloting and state control this and that. And now the feds want to basically say, well, you got to have an ID for federal offices. But then what about states? And eventually it might mean a total takeover of voting to the federal level. And the federal government's not good at much. That's why the founders made their lane so narrow in the first place and then divided it into the three branches secondarily to make sure that, these guys don't do much right. We got to keep a lid on that. And so although I understand the logic about, we got to have an ID to do everything else, I'm questioning the ID to do everything else, number one. But number two, I'm not so sure that the SAVE Act will give us what we hope for. At first it might, but eventually it might turn into a whole federal government takeover of elections. And so in the right hands, it might be good. But think about real ID. We fought it for over 20 years. Didn't want it. highlighted the concerns, the trouble that, and now under the Trump administration, hey, they slam dunked it. Now we have real ID. And so I'm not saying that we don't need to get a handle on elections, but there's so many things we're not doing. Let's jettison the machines, go to paper ballots. Let's go to the local precinct level where, everybody knows everybody, to pardon the country song kind of thing. And, I'm not saying an ID doesn't have validity, but I'm a little bit concerned that the feds will eventually take it over from the states. And then at the federal level, what don't they touch that they don't ruin, that they haven't been given constitutional authority to do? So, there's two sides of that, but I get your point that, hey, we can't just have illegals voting everywhere. That's a serious problem indeed. When we get back, though, I want to see what Lance has to say about this war. There's a division in MAGA right now. Some are saying, hey, Donald says there was a strike about to happen. We had to preempt that. Others are saying, no, hold on a minute. You can't do that. We've got this thing called the Constitution, and it prohibits it. Congress must decide if we go to war. I want to get Lance's take on that. We'll do it in seconds. You're watching Liberty Roundtable Live.
You know where the solution can be found, Mr. President? In churches, in wedding chapels, in maternity wards across the country and around the world. More babies will mean forward-looking adults, the sort we need to tackle long-term, large-scale problems. American babies in particular are likely going to be wealthier, better educated, and more conservation-minded than children raised in still industrializing countries. As economist Tyler Cowen recently wrote, quote, by having more children, you're making your nation more populous, thus boosting its capacity to solve climate change. The planet does not need for us to think globally and act locally so much as it needs us to think family and act personally. The solution to so many of our problems, at all times and in all places, is to fall in love, get married, and have some kids.
Introducing Managed IT Services from NPI. We offer top-notch data backup and recovery, email spam protection, and network security tailored to your needs and budget. With 20-plus years of experience in the medical field, our HIPAA-certified consultants know what it takes to protect sensitive information. Don't settle for less. Give us a call at 801-706-6980 and experience the difference with Managed IT Services. Remember, your IT support should be fast, efficient, and reliable.
Introducing PrepStartsNow.com, your ultimate guide to readiness and peace of mind. We offer practical preparedness tools, training, and education to take your family's household readiness to the next level. Browse the prep shop for essential products, check out our planning guides, and stay informed with our prep blog. Visit PrepStartsNow.com and subscribe to our emails for exclusive offers, new products, and future events. Remember, preparedness begins with PrepStartsNow.com.
Welcome back to Liberty Roundtable Live. Of course, this is your Edge of the Knife show. It's going to be a bumpy ride. There is division in MAGA. I don't know if I'd attribute it to the Iranian, kinetic event. The war started way before that. And many people across the country are dissatisfied, thinking that their vote was going to drain the swamp. So far, Sam, I just don't see that. So we have to start. If we're going to talk about MAGA division, we have to talk about what's not happening within the administration, because I don't believe it's just the war.
I agree. I think the war has just magnified the MAGA divide. But you're right. I think a lot of it starts with Kash Patel, and you quoted his, title of his book last segment, basically highlighting, we thought that a lot was going to happen here. We thought, hey, we're going to just take care of business. We're going to clean house. We're going to get rid of the corruptions. We're going to open up and solve the Epstein files. I think the Epstein files was one of the big things. Now they're looking into, New Mexico to see what was going on there. I mean, shouldn't we have been looking into this a long time ago? And then, hey, the bout faced by the president saying, yeah, let's dig in and get the files. And then, no, let's not. And then anybody who wanted the files is a bad guy. And now we're attacking people who agreed with Trump at the beginning. And when he pivoted, they didn't pivot. They said, no, wait a minute, we got to hold the line. And a lot of it has to do with the Epstein files. A lot of it has to do with promises kept. There's a lot to this, right?
Shh, Sam, don't talk about Epstein. We're not supposed to talk about Epstein. There's all kinds of weird stuff that just came out about President Trump himself. Yeah. Well, look, at the end of the day, I don't know that I believe any of the stories. They've been trying to perpetuate them. They've been creating using AI, lots of fake images, and suggesting that there's video of Donald Trump and it's going to be really
and if there is, let's talk about it and see it and all that. But the problem is they've got emails that have very damning information, but you don't know who they're from and who they're to. What good's that? And so we're getting a massive dump of millions of documents, a claim that millions haven't been released, redactions everywhere. The bottom line is, in my opinion, this investigation isn't narrowing. It's just making psychotic accusations that can't be proven. And in the end of the day, none of us are going to get to the bottom of any of this. That's by design, Lance.
Yeah. Well, look, they have to keep us, I always say that division and chaos are a tool of the deep state. And at the end of the day, that's part of it. They have to keep us divided. They have to keep, because of course, the American public united against Washington, D.C. There's 300 plus million of us. Arguably, I don't know how many, illegals add to that. I don't believe they'd participate, but that's a frightening issue for them. And we're getting more alignment. Oddly enough, I've been picking up a lot of, liberals watching my show simply because I think we have to unite. And, it's interesting when we have people that come on the show that they have a liberal background. It's interesting that we agree on 90% of the topics. And you're never going to get the far, far right and the far, far left to agree because they're extremists. At the end of the day, the 8 points in the middle, I think the most of us, want safety and security. We want to be able to pay our bills. We don't want high inflation. We don't want high prices at the gas pump. We're already suffering as it is financially. Many people are talking about what a struggle it is nowadays. But look here, the division in MAGA, we talk about it on our show constantly. And my take is this. If you're going to run on a certain amount of claims when you're running to be elected, then you have to, be a man of or a woman of your word. You have to deliver on what you told us you were going to deliver. And we're not getting that. The Epstein documents are just one example of that. I'm tired of government deciding what we're allowed to know and what we aren't supposed to know. And that doesn't matter whether it's the dirty 51+8, the Russian collusion hoax, the Seth Rich laptop, the list goes on. And they're fed up. We expected a massive amount of arrests related to election integrity, the Russian collusion hoax. We thought that he was going to go in there and start arresting people, and we're not seeing that. And of course, the big concern is that the Department of Justice isn't delivering what we expected. We thought that he was going to put Pam Bondi in there, and there would be these massive number of arrests. None of that's happened, and they don't want us to talk about it.
Not only have none of it's happened, but even when it comes to the elections, they haven't even uncovered really a lot of probabilities on a lot of this. In other words, you got to just start delivering facts to the press to force them to admit the truth. If you deliver hard facts and force them to admit the truth, none of that's happening. Then we find out that, hey, Pam Bondi and company looked into the auto pen scenario, which they said, hey, this is criminal. This can't stand. The, pardons that Biden didn't give, but he supposedly gave via auto pen, that's illegal and criminal. And now basically, I don't know if you know this, but they just dismissed the auto pen thing and said, hey, nothing here. Move along.
Yeah, they're saying that they don't have any statutes on the books that would allow them to go after people. I disagree with that. I think fraud vitiates everything. At the end of the day, fraud has no statute of limitations. And of course, that's not what they're going to do. Just like the first term when he said, oh, leave poor Hillary alone. No, I don't want to leave poor Hillary alone. I don't want to leave the J6.
I want to prosecute her for bleach bit, destroying evidence and smashing hard drives.
Yeah, of course.
I want to prosecute for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and she acted like as if she didn't even know who Epstein was when she was deposed. She's a nasty human being. She's a liar and a cheat. Her daughter getting $85 million from USAID. She went out and bought an $11 million mansion. She spent $3 million on the wedding. And for the life of myself and everybody that's researched it, nobody can figure out why Chelsea Clinton got $84 million. But how about all the USAID theft that Doge uncovered? Elon Musk said there was going to be lots of arrests.
Yeah, then we get in a fight with Elon, and now he's not even willing to participate. So we've lost that asset now. And for the most part, now he's just the richest man in the world. And, he's not really focused on any of this. And, Doge was, in my opinion, turned out to be a big bust, right?
Look, there is no doubt that there is a tremendous amount of fraud and theft that's occurred over and over and over again because it goes unchecked. There is no real oversight. Even in the DOJ, when you start looking at the oversight groups that keep an eye supposedly and keep the DOJ ethical and doing what they're supposed to be, they're all DOJ departments. The OPR, Office of Professional Responsibility, is DOJ. Civil Rights Division is DOJ. Public Integrity Division is DOJ. These are all the groups.
You've got to wonder DOJ. How many of those divisions even have the constitutional authority to even exist, for that matter. But, you know, they have the country song, I'm going through the big D and don't mean Dallas. You ever heard of that?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Have you ever heard the I'm going through the big D and don't mean Dallas? It's a country song.
No, I don't.
It means divorce, right?
I don't listen to a lot of music, honestly.
Anyway, it means divorce. I'm going through the big D and don't mean Dallas. That's kind of the country song. Well, now what it stands for is Doge didn't deliver.
You know, but at the end of the day, did they not deliver? Or were there powers that be that didn't allow them to deliver? When they started,
I think there were powers that be that didn't allow them to deliver. And I think the breakup between Donald and Elon is a lot of that. It's also the fact that, hey, Congress is derelict in their duty and not supporting Trump in anything he tries to do, really, that I can see.
Well, listen, you know, the Donald Trump, the threat the other day was, well, I just won't sign any new law that's coming across my desk until we settle on the SAVE Act. Listen, neither side wants the SAVE Act. They don't want voter ID. They don't want the voter rolls cleaned up. They don't want to get rid of the machines. How else would they control the system? How else would they appoint people with the IQs of oranges? I mean, AOC? Are you kidding me? I mean, thankfully, we won't have to listen to Jasmine Crockett again. But and maybe we will. Who knows? Maybe she'll.
Buddy, she'll turn up in the administration somewhere, buddy.
Well, but my point is, I said it the other day on our show, and I really believe this. I think these people should have to pass an independent IQ test. I don't need people, like as an example, Gavin Newsom the other day was boasting about the fact that he didn't even get an 800 on the SATs, and he alleged that he couldn't read. This is an individual that has presidential aspirations. Is this our brightest and best? I mean, for the country, I would ask the audience, are you not sick of all this, regardless of what you think your political affiliation is? And I don't believe in this political affiliation thing anymore. It's a joke. It's a manipulation. It's the David Copperfield. Look over here while we do something else over here.
And that's the Democrat-Republican partisan divide that the founding fathers warned us about and told us it would be the demise of the nation. And I think Americans are realizing that. So the Republicans feared that the Democrats would take over in midterms. But now what we're finding is incumbents are being challenged all over the place. Now it doesn't matter Democrat or Republican. We want them gone. And I think that's a healthy stance, to say the least. Will it be enough? Only time will tell. But I think we need to start to say, hey, forget your, D or R elephant or whatever clown show. What have you done for us? Where do you stand on the issues? I think the more we look at individuals that way and say, hey, who are you and what do you stand for? The sooner we can start to get to things that matter most.
Yeah. And, the real question comes down to, how do we fix it? And I don't have the answer. I struggle with it on the show constantly.
You get rid of the Federal Reserve and you get rid of parties.
Well,
because really parties are vote fraud by their very nature, right? The fact that a party has a special privilege is fraud already, right?
The fact that we have to rely on executive orders, which, let's face it, any new administration goes in, they could overturn every single one of those because they're not law.
Yep.
And, when you have a system so broken, the judiciary, what a joke. The bias is so incredible. They say when a judge enters the courtroom, and he puts the robe on, he's supposed to he's supposed to hang his bias up as if he's taking it off at the door. And then he's supposed to rule based on the law. That's not what we have. It's not even close to what we have. These judges, even the procedural blocks that they allowed the Department of Justice to use, it's nauseating, and it's ad infinitum. It just never stops. It's an unlimited amount of corruption.
Well, and until you impeach some of them, they're not going to stop, because we've gone from there to interpret the law. And if they're confused on it or it's not clear, they need to send it back to Congress for clarification. You put this law in place and no one knows what it means, so we need you to revisit this thing. Now they think they are the law, and whatever they say and do, they think is the law. There's a big concern about Iranian military sources. They're now threatening retaliatory action regarding financial sectors, and they say they're also going to be really pointing towards the tech sector for attack. We'll come back and talk about that. Michael Flynn's bringing this up, and I want to see what you think. Are they going to attack the tech sector? How will that affect us globally and in the U.S.? Lance Migliaccio with me. You're watching Liberty Roundtable Live.
protecting your liberties. You're listening to Liberty News Radio.
News this hour from Town Hall. I'm Greg Clugston in Washington. In the Middle East, Iran has attacked commercial ships across the Persian Gulf and targeted Dubai International Airport. It's day 11 of the war now against Iran as Israel and the U.S. continue their aerial assault. Joint Chiefs Chairman General Dan Kane says U.S. forces have begun to target Iran's military-industrial complex.
Focusing on centers of gravity to get upstream of the shooters out in the field in order to deny them the ability to continue to generate those one-way attack drones.
We're paying quite a bit more at the gas pump since the war began, but White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt predicts the recent increase in oil and gas prices is only temporary.
Once the national security objectives of Operation Epic Fury are fully achieved, Americans will see oil and gas prices drop rapidly, potentially even lower than they were prior to the start of the operation.
Consumer prices held mostly steady in February, but are up 2.4% over the past 12 months. However, the new report could already be outdated since those oil and gas prices have soared because of the war. Shots were fired at the U.S. consulate in downtown Toronto. On CTV, Chris Leather with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police said it's being treated as a national security incident.
For the moment, while the early stages of the investigation are taking place, we have increased security around embassies and consulate buildings here in Toronto and in the Ottawa region.
There were no injuries. Several tornadoes have torn through parts of Illinois and Indiana, leveling homes and downing trees and power lines. It happened in an area south of Chicago. This morning, officials announced at least 2 people were killed in the community of Lake Village, Indiana. More on these stories at townhall.com.
Have you noticed losing weight is harder than it used to be? You're eating better and exercising, but the scale barely moves? The real problem isn't willpower, it's metabolic dysfunction. And standard dieting just makes it worse. PhD Weight Loss has helped thousands fix the root cause of stubborn weight. Take their free metabolic assessment at fixmyweightloss.com. Fixmyweightloss.com. It's quick, personalized, and shows why your body is resisting weight loss so you know exactly what to fix. Visit fixmyweightloss.com. That's fixmyweightloss.com.
I'm Boomer Esiason. My mom died from cancer. She was only 37 years old. She didn't have life insurance, and that was devastating for my family. That's why having life insurance is so important to me. Ethos makes it fast and easy. Get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. You can get up to $3 million in coverage with no medical exam.
Get your free quote at ethos.com/save. That's ethos.com/save. Paid spokesperson. Time spent on application may vary. Online health questions required.
Former Sheriff Richard Mack recounts in his book The Proper Role of Law Enforcement how he came to realize while working as a beat cop how wrong the all-too-common orientation of police officers is when they think of their job as being to write tickets and arrest people. Richard Mack tells of his personal transformation from by-the-number cop to Constitution-conscious defender of citizen safety and freedoms. Learn what it really means to serve and protect. Purchase your copy at cspoa.org. That's cspoa.org.
Do you know what is great about America? Ask an Immigrant. Ask an Immigrant is a new podcast dedicated to helping Americans, especially our youth, value, appreciate, and be grateful for the freedoms we have here in America. Join host Lydia Wallace-Nuttall as she interviews immigrants from around the world to discover their inspiring personal stories about why they came to America. To learn more about why America is the most prosperous, greatest country in the world, download the Loving Liberty app or go to lovingliberty.net.
The Foundation for Moral Law is a nonprofit legal foundation committed to protecting our unalienable right to publicly acknowledge God. The Foundation for Moral Law exists to restore the knowledge of God in law and government and to acknowledge and defend the truth that man is endowed with rights not by our fellow man, but by God. The Foundation maintains a twofold focus. First, litigation within state and federal courts. Second, education, conducting seminars to teach the necessity and importance of acknowledging God in law and government. How can you help? please make a tax-deductible contribution, allowing foundation attorneys to continue the fight. You may also purchase various foundation products as well at morallaw.org. Located in Montgomery, Alabama, the Foundation for Moral Law is a nonprofit, tax-exempt 501c3 founded by Judge Roy Moore. Please partner with us to achieve this important mission. morallaw.org.
All right, back with you live. Lance Migliaccio, thebigmig.com. Check out their website. Check out their incredible shows on X, on Rumble, on YouTube. They're everywhere, even on Liberty News Radio every Saturday with their radio show. They're doing a phenomenal job, the tip of the spear. Hey, if liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they don't want to hear. That's critical, folks. Remember that. All right, so I'm saying, hey, now there's a concern. General Mike Flynn brought this up, that, hey, Iran now is desperate. They're losing. They're desperate. And so they are trying to broaden their attacks. We know they've already attacked all these other countries to try to broaden it, but now they're getting desperate. So they're going to go after the banking and tech sectors. What do you think, Lance?
Well, I think it's absolutely, a scary and frightening possibility. Okay, when you look at our infrastructure, clearly it's wide open. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about the power grid or water supplies or the tech sector. It would be very easy for them to interrupt it with strategic strikes. If these sleeper cells, in fact, are true, and if we know they're here in the United States, and I believe the United States intelligence apparatus believes they're here, and these are going to be highly skilled individuals that aren't going to be easy to locate. They're probably going to have all the training they need to interrupt that system. And I don't care whether it's a technical hack or a kinetic, event like a strategic bomb or something else in a key location. Why wouldn't they do it, Sam? It's the perfect thing to do. If you can create a lot of fear in the country, then of course, then the deep state destructors will be able to get them. Oh gosh, do you believe this is going on? We warned you this would happen. Why didn't we just not do this? That's part of the plan.
And some are suggesting too that they might wait until the 4th of July to have maximum impact when America's celebrating 250 and the 4th of July. So they're waiting closer to the elections before they start some of these things. So they're intentionally waiting. It's hard to know the truth on this, what's speculation versus what's fact. But I mean, there are things that stand to reason in that regard, right?
Yeah. I mean, wouldn't it make sense? Let's face it, that they're experts in that. Iran has been funding terrorism for decades. They were assisted by Obama, with all the pallets of cash he delivered to him, all the funds that were released by Biden, the 4,000 pounds of man pads that were somehow disappeared into Iranian ownership. We know they've definitely doubled down and invested. Listen, they've been mining Bitcoin, and I had no knowledge of this. They've been using their own power at these discounted prices, stealing it from hospitals and their own people. But they're mining Bitcoin, Sam, at $1,360 some odd dollars of Bitcoin. Can you imagine the Bitcoin reserve that they're probably sitting on thumb drives? The Ayatollah Khomeini probably controlled billions and billions of dollars of Bitcoin. I don't think anybody really knows how much they accumulated. That funding has been used for all kinds of nefarious operations around the globe.
Well, and there's funding from China, but the fact is we fund China with a massive trade deficit every month. Every month there's a massive trade deficit going straight to China, and then China basically uses Iran as their forward-looking terrorist base, right? I mean, that's reality, isn't it?
Well, look, we let manufacturing be exported because all the costs related to businesses here. No wonder they wanted to move and buy out of the country. And of course, the American public has turned, looking for discounted prices. Alibaba, AliExpress, people are buying off there constantly rather than buying and paying the high prices here.
Well, and I think that's going to get even worse over time. And I don't mean to be negative about this. Before we get to the economy discussion, though, what do you think about the war? Should Trump have done it? Or do you think the Constitution, do we need Congress? MAGA split on that too. What's your take, Lance?
Look, Iran's been a problem for a long time in the Middle East. Like I said, they've been involved with so many different terrorist groups and funding them. They've always been an issue, and when it comes to the stabilization of that, geography. And I really think the final straw was this Pakistani that was assigned and hired potentially to kill Donald Trump. I think that was probably the final straw for him. Always when it comes down to Trump, he's going to pull the trigger if it's something that is directly, an impact to him personally or his family. So what do I really think? Yeah, I think it was probably necessary. I don't think there was another way to solve the problem because, of course, they were working on nuclear weapons. I truly believe they probably have already got some, maybe supplied by Russia or China. We know that their oil is crucial to China. That's why they went into hyperdrive and sent billions of barrels of oil to China, because besides the fact that they knew that capital wouldn't be restricted for them getting access to it.
Well, and now there's a story out that China, even before this kickoff happened, starting at the beginning of the year, they got a ton of extra oil to make sure they had a bunch of extra reserves. You wonder how much foreknowledge they had that this was all going to go down. Interesting, huh?
Well, look, there's no doubt. I mean, I don't think Trump's ever been one to keep things close to the vest when it comes to his popularity or polling scores. He made it very clear what he was going to do. And listen, I don't agree with what the Iranian government did to their own people after they were protesting. They're unhappy with it. Many people want to go back to calling Iran Persia, but it goes way beyond that. Lots of issues with lots of infrastructure and supplies and food for the Iranian people. They've been suffering under the Ayatollah Khomeini. And, this is not a good administration. Politically, they're not good. Morally, they're not good. Ethically, they're not good. So I agree with the strike. What I don't agree with is the division in Congress. They act as if this has been, the Iranians have been great. No, they haven't been great. They know it. But anytime, this administration does something that seems to be good for the American people, all there is a bunch of crying and whining coming out of a bunch of, toddlers in Congress.
What about the Constitution? Some are saying, hey, you know what? You got to do it right. The law says you got to have Congress declare a war. This is clearly a war. We can debate terms, but Trump doesn't have the authority to do this by himself. Is that valid in your mind?
The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, but I don't like to pick and choose, and I feel like that's what happens here with our congressional members. They pick and choose. They only select the parts of the Constitution that are good for the current narrative. If they really adhered to it, it's 17 subject matters specific to what the federal government is supposed to be in control of and how they're supposed to operate. But that's not what's going on. The Constitution,
and if they're in power, it doesn't matter. And if they're not in power, they use it as kind of a weapon too, right?
Yeah. And it's selective, right? That's not what the Constitution was ever supposed to be. But our laws have manipulated it. The Commerce Clause has overextended it. They operate unconstitutionally, non-constitutionally. So when they pull that out of their hat and go, but he's acting unconstitutionally, I'm tired of that. It wasn't unconstitutional when Barack Obama had 8 different events where he went after specific countries.
Yeah, it really was then too, though.
Cried then when it was Barack.
Right. And that's the problem with partisan politics, Republican and Democrat reality. I think the Constitution matters all the time. However, Trump already took these actions and we're beyond whether he should have done it or not because he already did. Now we got to deal with the reality of war and how much will it affect America and the American economy is kind of my question. So the Iran war now drives fuel surcharges. U.S. gas hits $3.54 a gallon on the average. Diesel, $4.78. Raising pressure on airlines, truckers, the economy. And a lot of people are thinking, well, I don't drive a diesel, it's okay. No, it's not okay because that diesel, whether it be train driven or whether it be, a diesel 18-wheeler on the road or whatever, that's how we get all of our goods and services distributed across the United States, folks. And the problem is this is eventually going to have a big effect on prices. There's no way to avoid it unless Trump can get oil flowing in the Straits of Hormuz, or unless we can get oil from Venezuela or whatever. They say, well, we produce enough oil in the United States. We do, but we export a lot of it because our refineries aren't set in the mode to deal with our sweet crude versus some of the other oil that we bring in. And there's a difference in the way the refineries work. And it would take 6 months to get the refineries to kind of kick over to what we do. I mean, it's complicated, but the point is it's going to affect us personally and our wallets. And I think that coming up to the preterm elections is disaster, Lance.
Well, we're never going to win the midterms. I've said it over and over again on my show. The only way we win the midterms, it's got nothing to do with oil. It's got nothing to do with inflation. It really comes down to one thing. If you really want to win the midterms, then start arresting all these nefarious players, all these deep state actors. I mean, start cleaning out the swamp immediately
And abolish the IRS if you want to win the midterms. If we're bringing in so much money from tariffs and everything else, hey, we got the ERS cranked up now, the External Revenue Service. Get rid of the IRS and make the American people think you're serious.
No doubt. I mean, listen, we were supposed to have an audit of Fort Knox. Now they're saying they did the audit because I think they've seen the fallout over that whole. But they didn't video it. They aren't going to show us anything. They're just going to tell us what's in there. There's just too many questions. And listen, and I don't think it's just, we'll talk about conservatives and liberals if you want to, but at the end of the day, I think everybody's fed up. Nobody wants to, pay these prices at the grocery store. The fact that oil already increased at the pump, the oil that increased at the pump, that gas, it was already here in the United States. It was already refined. Those prices that they paid for that gas, it wasn't at the higher price. So why did the prices already go up? We haven't even seen that first because let's face it, all the oil companies were bought most of the oil that's at the pumps. What, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 8 months ago?
Yeah, a lot of it's because you have futures and people play games on futures and then they take the opportunity to follow the futures, and that's all speculative. And now we're taking speculative futures on paper and backing them into hard asset, really reserves and everything else. And it's a sad tale to tell. But I want to talk about how much the U.S. military has already spent. I want to talk about our weapons. Are they being depleted too fast? We'll discuss it.
In the medical field, IT security is crucial. Our highly skilled consultants are HIPAA certified and have 20-plus years of experience servicing medical clinics, billing, and supply companies. We offer comprehensive endpoint protection, guarding your computers and servers against all stages of threats. And with our 24/7 monitoring services, you'll never worry about extensive downtime again. Ready to level up your IT support? Call 801-706-6980 today and discover how great IT services can be with managed IT services.
Experience the untamed spirit of the American West with Range Magazine. Each issue is a visual journey featuring award-winning photography and compelling stories that capture the heart of ranching and rural life. Stay informed on the challenges and triumphs of those who live and work on the land. Subscribe today and receive quarterly editions delivered to your doorstep, and join a community that cherishes the enduring legacy of the Western frontier. Visit rangemagazine.com to subscribe.
Recent studies show that parents who smoke in the home are more likely to have children who smoke.
Yes, in fact, my brother, he's 22 now. He told me and my father that's why he started smoking. One of the reasons why he started smoking is because my dad was around, and they saw my dad smoking. My dad said, "Okay, I don't want you to smoke. I don't want you to watch what I'm doing."
Recent studies also show that in homes where parents don't smoke, their children usually don't smoke either.
I am the way I am because my grandparents taught me what not to do. They gave me morals. They gave me belief. They gave me something to believe in. They just taught me well. I love them. I do.
Smoking. If you think you're old enough to start, you're smart enough to stop. A public service message from this station and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
All right, back with you live. There's a big debate about munitions and how much money we're spending on this war. Some are saying we're depleting our capabilities and our wherewithal way too fast. Donald Trump says, don't worry, we've got this. But Donald Trump also then quadrupled the output from some of our military partner manufacturers and contractors and everything else. But it's a money thing and it's a munitions thing. Are we going to put ourselves in a position of weakness? We've been funding wars forever. I mean, think about how much we've been given to Ukraine and fighting with Russia and this and that. And now we're opening up this, we're doing that. And the question becomes, hey, are we going to have a hardware problem? But the military-industrial complex has been at this forever. Lance, this is a concern or no?
Well, I think it's always a concern. I mean, you have to have a strategic military stockpile for safety and security. And there's always going to be an issue once you get into these kinetic events. But, I truly believe, not that I'm by any way trying to underpitch, $5.6 billion on munitions in the first 2 days of strikes on Iran. That's a big number. And they struck, over 5,000 targets, used over 2,000 munitions, and that started February 28th. But, again, I think this is Congress trying to, ring the dinner bell. They want Pavlov's dog kind of action. They want everybody to start salivating and, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? It's fear mongering, because I don't remember Congress complaining that when the U.S. provided over $67 billion in security assistance to Ukraine. And that started in February of 2022. And there's no doubt that we exported lots of munitions in lots of different categories to Ukraine. But Congress, oh no, we've got to support Ukraine. And they put a flag up in Congress, which I think was one of the most disgusting things that's ever happened in the halls of our, congressional, building. But look, the categories that are affected, you have to look at everything. You have to look at, what they did with Ukraine. We sent lots of 155 millimeter, artillery shells, rocket systems, anti-tank munitions, like our javelins, lots of critical air defense systems such as Patriot interceptors. So we had already done this, 67 billion. They're talking about this 5.6 billion. And I'm not trying to say that's a small number. It's not. But look, these are strategic concerns, and depletion of stockpiles is always going to be one of those things you have to worry about. It's always going to raise concerns. Listen, the military industrial complex has been overcharging the U.S. government for decades. Now, there is good news on this front. There are lots of low-cost manufacturers coming online. They're coming up with really innovative systems in drone technology and otherwise. I really think that we really need to empower them and do everything we can to bring them online quickly. But I will tell you this, there's no doubt that China is watching this closely. And we have to be concerned that if they think we got to a point where we couldn't defend our borders and defend our own country, they might make a more aggressive move and really show outward support for Iran. We understand there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. So, yeah, this is concerning. But when U.S. lawmakers start ringing the dinner bell, I'm just not going to salivate, because they didn't do it for Ukraine. Why now is it only for Iran?
And those are fair questions. My concern, too, is the money. I mean, we're already $38 trillion in debt. Our credit rating has already taken a hit multiple times. What's going to happen if we just start spending ourselves into oblivion in wars that we can't sustain or fund? I believe if they didn't have the Federal Reserve fake fiat money, endless supply in the first place, we wouldn't be here, because we couldn't fund it or afford it. And, that's one of the reasons that the founders kind of tied us to constitutional currency, intrinsic value, asset-based money, because it held us to account for the things we spent and the things we do. And so I'm a little bit worried about our credit rating on the end of this. I mean, how fast will the debt go up when we spend like this? Now President Trump is saying, I'm going to go to Congress and ask for billions more money. It's a munitions discussion, but it's also a financial discussion, right?
Well, look, of course it's financial discussion, but if we really had the concerns about our finances, then why did Congress so aggressively, weaponize the judiciary so they would block Donald Trump on these tariffs? We were bringing in excessive amounts of money, and regardless of what they claim was the reasoning behind it, does it make any common sense that you have this source of unlimited capital? We've been screwed over by tariffs by so many countries for decades again. Donald Trump fixes the system. We've got this incredible amount of money coming in, which potentially could pay down debt, could fund lots of things like this, maybe even give the American, people a little boost. He was talking about a $2,000 payment. That's out the window. I don't know what happened to the 10% interest rate on credit cards. That was supposed to happen on February 20th. Nothing but crickets now. Not another word, because, of course, these banks don't want to give up these massive amounts of interest they're making on the American people. They don't want to do that. My argument is, when is Congress going to have common sense? Like, listen, if the law said that he's not supposed to do tariffs, then why didn't you guys just pass it and say, hey, these tariffs are great for the country, which they were. And we were,
and if you feel like Trump's all over the map and using them as a weapon, you could hold the line and say, we've already backed Trump on tariffs. Here's what we've authorized. Yeah. And Trump, you need to stick to that. But yet, hey, they're just on recess. They're just arguing back and forth, partisan politics. They're just, and I think sadly, the Republicans don't have a lot to run on. They really don't.
I mean, look, and the truth is they never align across party. There's always this division. Everybody celebrated. Oh, the House, we got the House. Oh, we got the Senate. We're this. We're
but then they always go, we don't have the 60 to get rid of the filibuster and everything else, so we're still dead in the water. Then we got 2 or 3 defectors that just sink our ship. And hey, they always love to have that close but no cigar, Lance.
Thune came out yesterday. Oh, yeah, we're definitely going to vote on the SAVE Act, but I'm sorry, we don't have enough votes to pass it. Of course you don't have enough votes to pass it. You guys don't worry about the American public. You're worried about your power. You're worried about your money. Let's face it. Anybody with common sense would have said gung-ho on the tariffs. Let's go. Great idea, President Trump. But no, that's not good enough. So my thing is, when they bring up this money about what we're using for munitions, then I would say, okay, well, that's great. Why don't you get me back the $67 billion from Ukraine then? Go ahead and have them pay us back, because that kinetic event was lost the day that war started. Does anybody seriously believe that Ukraine ever had an opportunity or a chance to beat the Russians? Come on. It's just
and now what we've done is we've said certain people can go to Russia to get oil because now that we've got this Strait of Hormuz kind of battle going on, and now there's an oil crunch around the world as a result of a lot of this. Now we're saying, oh, you can get some oil from Russia. We're kind of giving some exceptions. Did you see that?
I did. And when it comes to Russia, I just don't think Putin is the enemy. I think he's trying to make Russia great again. He's focused on Russia for what it is. I'm not saying I agree with all his policies, but we have a golden opportunity. There's a real level of respect between Donald Trump and, Putin. And it could be an opportunity for us to align ourselves in a different way and move forward with a completely different political, geopolitical kind of alliance. And we sit here and of course, nobody wants that. You got Lindsey Graham, the warmonger, that I just don't understand why Donald Trump continues to support his fat ass. But, here he is right away, just telling, going along with whatever Lindsey wants. And he's just over there. I personally believe that Lindsey Graham is receiving an excessive amount of money from Israel.
Lindsey Graham has blatantly admitted that he's been talking to Netanyahu and saying, hey, Netanyahu, you need to convince Trump to do this. And I mean, that's out there. You can say that's speculation or not true, or, Trump would say, no, we're leading this, not Israel, and everything else. But no doubt it's a partnership. Trump even said, hey, in order to stop this or decide when we're done with this war, me and Bibi are going to have to agree on what's going to happen. And the buck stops with me. Don't be mistaken. I'm in charge here. And I'm thinking, shouldn't you be discussing this with Congress rather than, Benjamin Netanyahu? And, I'm not here to attack Israel per se either. I'm just here to say I'd rather us look domestically to our own people and our own branches of government than to look to outside actors for these kind of discussions, right?
Listen, I don't feel like myself personally, wouldn't feel the obligation to consult with Israel on every single thing I was doing. I don't think they're important enough, to be honest with you. I think the only reason they're important is because of how many of the narrative systems they control. And of course, the funding from behind the scenes. And listen, the Mossad are really good at black ops. I'm sure they've got lots of our government officials compromised. The Epstein operation was all about blackmail and compromise and insider trading and all kinds of other nefarious things. We know that Epstein was working with the CIA and the FBI. That's probably why they didn't want the files to come out, because there's just too deep a connection into our intelligence apparatus. But look, it is what it is. And for anybody out there that just keeps buying into the crying coming out of Congress, you're wasting your time. You're looking at a completely corrupt institution within our U.S. government.
Sadly, too, this war, I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know if we're going to embolden China to push to take over Taiwan. When we push for regime change in Iran, when we push for regime change in Venezuela, when we push for regime change likely in Cuba, at some point the world starts to look at us and go, man, you guys are just out of control. Now, we would say, hold on. We want the Monroe Doctrine. It's about controlling our hemisphere. It's about this. It's about that. And that's our view. But when you go that aggressive, I think a lot of people are having a hard time swallowing that. The concern becomes, what do other actors start to do, in a sense, following our lead? Now, you would say, well, no, that's not the same, Sam. You're not comparing apples. Well, China's not going to compare apples either. They're just going to do what they think they can get away with doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no doubt that China wants to take over Taiwan. They've made it very clear. They've been very vocal about it. And I understand their reasoning. Not that I agree with it. And for us, the big concern is Taiwan. You have to look at what we get there for the tech community, and it's really dangerous. But of course, that's because we exported everything. But how do you expect American manufacturers to deal with workman's comp and unemployment and health insurance? They've been force-fed by unions. The costs are through the roof, and that's getting all passed through to the American people. No wonder all our manufacturing has moved out of the country. There hasn't been any support. And let's face it, we waste so much money, just like the $67 billion we sent to Ukraine. And people are saying it's hundreds of billions. All
right, hour one, wrapping up. TheBigMig.com. Check them out. Rumble, X, YouTube. They're everywhere, baby. Even on Liberty News Radio on the weekends. I'm Sam Bushman. Hour one in the can. Hour two coming up. God save the Republic of the United States of America.